The Japan Sea at 2:47 on a Tuesday morning is dark, cold, and quiet, in the way that bodies of water are quiet when the only things moving on them are naval vessels that would prefer not to be noticed. The stars are clear above the overcast that has been building since midnight. The sea state is 2, which is to say the water is not aggressive, but it is present, and the wind across the bridge wing carries the specific cold of a North Pacific October night that gets into the collar and stays there regardless of what you do about it. It is, by every available measure, a poor time to be awake. Aboard USS Curtis Wilbur, DDG-54, an Arleigh Burke flight. One destroyer commissioned in 1994 and currently operating approximately 180 nautical miles west of the Japanese coast in the Japan Sea. The midwatch team has been maintaining its station since 0000 hours. The midwatch is the 0000 to 0400 watch, which is widely considered the least desirable watch rotation in naval service for reasons that do not require elaboration. The watch team is managing the surface picture, maintaining the air search, and monitoring the elevated alert posture that has been in effect since a notice was distributed through the intelligence channels 18 hours ago, indicating elevated probability of a North Korean ballistic missile activity in the coming 72-hour window. The notice did not specify type, trajectory, or timing. It specified probability. The probability was elevated. The watch team has been managing the elevated alert posture with the professional attention of people who have managed elevated alert postures in the Japan Sea before and who are aware that elevated probability does not mean imminent, and imminent does not mean tonight, and tonight does not mean 2:47, and yet here they all are at 2:47 because someone has to be. The coffee in the Combat Information Center is from the pot made at midnight when the watch changed. It is 2:47. The pot, made at midnight, has been resting for 2 hours and 47 minutes. This is relevant context. USS Curtis Wilbur is in the Japan Sea tonight because she is the forward-deployed ballistic missile defense asset for this operational period. This is a specific and important mission that is different from what the other destroyers in this guide have been doing. USS Curtis Wilbur is not here to conduct freedom of navigation operations. She's not here to escort commercial shipping. She's not here to harass anyone or be harassed by anyone. She is here because her Aegis combat system has been upgraded to the BMD 5.1 configuration, which means her SPY-1D radar has been optimized for the specific challenge of detecting, tracking, and, if authorized, engaging ballistic missiles in the boost, mid-course, and terminal phases of their trajectories. She carries SM-3 Block 2A interceptor missiles, each of which costs approximately $37.5 million, which is a number that deserves a moment of attention. $37.5 million per missile. The SM-3 Block 2A is not a defensive weapon in the budget sense that the word defensive sometimes implies. It is a $37.5 million investment in the proposition that a ballistic missile should not reach its intended destination. The Curtis Wilbur has them in her vertical launch cells, ready, waiting, and authorized for employment under specific conditions that the rules of engagement define with the precision that $37.5 million per round requires. The specific conditions are important and worth understanding because they define the shape of what happens in the next 40 minutes. The BMD rules of engagement for USS Curtis Wilbur in the Japan Sea operate on a tiered authorization structure. Tier 1, detection and tracking. Curtis Wilbur does this automatically and continuously. It requires no authorization. The SPY-1D in BMD mode is watching the sky above the Korean peninsula, with the patient, continuous attention of a system that was specifically designed to see things coming from that direction before they become problems. Tier 2, engagement solution calculation. Also, automatic and continuous. The system calculates intercept solutions against any detected ballistic track. Because calculating solutions is computationally inexpensive, and having them ready is operationally essential. Tier 3, weapons-free authorization. This requires the commanding officer, the tactical action officer, and a transmitted authorization from the Regional Combatant Command. It requires the track to be classified as a threat rather than a test. It requires positive confirmation that the trajectory intersects with Allied territory. It requires, in short, a set of conditions that are specific, sequential, and designed to ensure that a $37.5 million missile is not expended on a target that does not meet the criteria for engagement. The criteria are clear. The chain is established. At 2:47, none of the Tier 3 conditions have been met, and the watch team is operating at Tier 1 and 2, which means they are watching and calculating and drinking 2-hour 47-minute-old coffee and waiting. At 2:51, the SPY-1D returns a new track. The track originates from the vicinity of Musudan-ri, on the North Korean coast approximately 110 nautical miles to the west-northwest of Curtis Wilbur's current position. The track is rising. The acceleration profile is consistent with a solid fuel ballistic missile in the boost phase. Steep climb angle, high thrust, characteristic infrared signature that the Defense Support Program satellites in geosynchronous orbit have already detected and are transmitting to the watch teams at Schriever Space Force Base, and simultaneously down the chain to every BMD-capable asset in the theater. The satellite warning reaches Curtis Wilbur's BMD processor at 2:51:08. The SPY-1D's independent detection follows at 2:51:14, 6 seconds after the satellite warning, because the satellite is a space-based infrared system looking down at the launch, and Curtis Wilbur's radar is a ground-to-air system looking up at a track that has just crossed the radar horizon at this range. 6 seconds. The system is working as designed. The tactical action officer has the track at 2:51:15. He is on the internal comms before the second timestamp finishes. Commanding officer, combat. Ballistic missile launch detected, Musudan-ri, 2:51, track rising, boost phase, SPY confirmation. The commanding officer, who has been in the sea cabin adjacent to the Combat Information Center since the elevated alert posture went into effect 18 hours ago, and who was not actually asleep in any meaningful sense, is through the door and in the CIC at 2:51:44, 29 seconds. He reviews the track. He reviews the trajectory projection. He looks at the impact point calculation that the Aegis BMD processor has already generated. The calculation says the trajectory is projecting toward the Japan Sea, approximately 380 nautical miles northeast of the launch point, not toward Japanese territory, not toward Allied territory, toward open water. This is, in the vocabulary of ballistic missile defense, a test round. A missile launched on a flat trajectory into the sea to demonstrate capability, collect performance data, or communicate a political message without the trajectory that would require the Tier 3 authorization chain to activate. The commanding officer looks at the trajectory projection for exactly the amount of time it takes a commanding officer with his experience to confirm what he is seeing. Then he says, "Track it. No engagement. Full collection." He picks up the phone to Fleet. He reports the launch. His voice is steady. It is the voice of a professional who has been in this chair for this exact purpose and who has just been given the most important piece of information of his Japan Sea deployment, which is that the trajectory is going into open water and the authorization chain is not going to be activated tonight, which means the entire focus of the next 37 minutes is going to be what USS Curtis Wilbur can learn about this missile before it lands. This is the vulnerability window, and it runs from 2:51 to approximately 3:04, and it is real, and it deserves to be explained with precision. At 2:51, when the launch is first detected, the SPY-1D's tracking quality on a ballistic missile in boost phase at 110 nautical miles is excellent but not yet complete. The boost phase lasts approximately 80 seconds for this type of solid fuel missile. During those 80 seconds, the SPY-1D is building its track solution. Range, velocity, trajectory angle, burn time, estimated burnout velocity, estimated apogee, estimated impact point. and every data point it is adding refines the solution. For the first 40 seconds of tracking, the projected impact point has an uncertainty ellipse that is large enough that the commanding officer cannot definitively rule out a trajectory that curves toward Allied territory. The trajectory is projecting toward open water. The uncertainty ellipse includes the possibility that the projection is slightly off. This is not a scenario where the commanding officer is uncertain about what to do. The BMD doctrine is clear, and the doctrine says wait for the track to resolve. But for 40 seconds, the track solution has an uncertainty ellipse that makes the watch team's focus intense in a way that is not performed. They are watching the track resolve. Every second of the boost phase that the SPY-1D adds to its solution narrows the uncertainty ellipse. At 2:52:30, the ellipse no longer includes Allied territory. The commanding officer notes this. The focus in the CIC does not relax because the track is still rising and the collection mission has just begun, but the specific quality of the 40-second uncertainty window closes. There is also a second element to the vulnerability window that has nothing to do with the trajectory uncertainty and everything to do with the timing of the launch. At 2:51, USS Curtis Wilbur is at the midpoint of the midwatch. The crew rotation means that the most experienced watch team members are not necessarily the ones on station. The senior tactical action officer has the watch, but two of the three BMD specialist operators at the combat control consoles are junior petty officers who are on their second Japan Sea deployment and who have conducted many BMD training exercises and exactly one previous live launch detection event. The live launch detection event is different from the training exercise in ways that training tries to simulate and cannot fully replicate. For the first 90 seconds of the track, the consoles are operating with the controlled, heightened attention of operators who are doing the real thing for the first time under real conditions. They perform correctly. The training holds. But the 90-second window when the track is live and the uncertainty ellipse is open and the junior operators are running their consoles with live data for the first time is a window that the commanding officer is aware of and that he manages by being present or visible and precisely calm. He does not say anything reassuring. He says what the track is showing. He describes the data. He manages the room by making the data the focus rather than the emotion. By 2:53, the uncertainty ellipse has closed and the operators are running their consoles with the competence of people whose training has been confirmed by the real thing. Now let us talk about what USS Curtis Wilbur is collecting, because the intelligence dimension of a North Korean ballistic missile test observed at close range by a BMD-capable Aegis destroyer is not a footnote to the defensive mission. It is the mission within the mission, and it is, in practical terms, more operationally significant than the engagement that did not happen. The SPY-1D in BMD mode is tracking the missile's boost phase with a resolution that requires the missile to be doing exactly what it is doing, climbing on a predictable trajectory at close range with no attempt at evasion or maneuvering. The boost phase data package that the Aegis BMD processor is building includes the burn time of the solid fuel motor, which tells analysts the propellant mass and specific impulse of the propulsion system. It includes the acceleration profile during boost, which tells analysts the thrust-to-weight ratio and confirms or refutes estimates of the missile's total weight at launch. It includes the burnout velocity, which is the most critical single parameter for assessing the missile's maximum range. A missile that burns out at a higher velocity than previous assessments estimated has a longer range than the assessments said. These are not incremental data points. They are the parameters that missile defense planning is built on, and they have never been measured on this specific variant from this launch facility under these specific operational conditions before. The missile's burnout occurs at 2:52:47. The SPY-1D has tracked the entire boost phase, 96 seconds from first detection to burnout, with continuous high-quality data. The burnout velocity measurement is calculated by the Aegis BMD processor at 2:52:49. The processing of that measurement takes approximately 0.3 seconds. At 2:52:49.3, the Tactical Action Officer's console shows a number. The Tactical Action Officer looks at the number. He looks at it again. "That burnout velocity is higher than the existing assessment," he says to the commanding officer. The commanding officer looks at the console. "By how much?" The tactical action officer checks the comparison against the threat library entry. "Approximately 4.2%. The commanding officer does not say anything for a moment. Then, "Get that to fleet immediately," the tactical action officer transmits. The number goes to fleet at 252:55. Fleet has it. The theater commander has it. The intelligence community has it within 4 minutes, because the data pipeline for live BMD track data is the fastest and highest priority data distribution channel in the theater, and it was designed to move this specific kind of number from the sensor to the analyst before the analyst has had time to wonder why it has not arrived yet. The 4.2% variance in burnout velocity is not a dramatic number in isolation. In the context of ballistic missile range estimation, it changes the maximum range assessment by a margin that the analysts will calculate precisely, but that can be described in general terms as operationally significant. A missile with 4.2% more burnout velocity than the existing threat library entry can reach a target set that the existing assessment placed outside its envelope. The analysts will calculate exactly which targets. The calculation will change something about how Allied forces are positioned and what assets are where. The calculation will happen within the next 4 hours. The data that enabled it was collected by a ship sitting in the Japan Sea at 2:51 on a Tuesday morning, that the crew had every reason to hope would be uneventful. The mid-course phase begins at 2:52:47, when the missile's motor burns out and the vehicle enters the coasting arc of its ballistic trajectory. The SPY-1D tracks it continuously. 110 nautical miles, 130, 160, as the track arcs upward toward an apogee that the processor calculates at approximately 320 kilometers altitude. This is a depressed trajectory compared to a maximum range profile. The launch facility at Musudan-ri is not trying to maximize range tonight. The trajectory is a demonstration trajectory, designed to achieve a specific range on a specific bearing for a specific political and technical purpose. The political purpose is communication. The technical purpose is performance data. Both are being served by a flight that also happens to be serving USS Curtis Wilbur's collection purpose, which is to observe everything it can observe from the closest BMD-capable asset in the theater. The apogee observation is itself a data point. The precise altitude of apogee, measured by the SPY-1D's trajectory tracking, confirms the thrust and propellant estimates made from the boost phase data. The correlation between boost phase measurements and apogee altitude is a consistency check that adds confidence to both. The correlation goes in the collection record. The electronic warfare officer below decks is managing a different but complementary collection activity. The missile's telemetry system, the radio transmitter that sends performance data from the missile back to the launch facility's ground support equipment, is broadcasting on a known frequency. The SLQ-32 has it. The telemetry signal is encrypted. The content is not readable. But the frequency, the signal architecture, the transmission intervals, and the power level are all logged, and the comparison of tonight's telemetry signal against the existing threat library entry for North Korean ballistic missile telemetry systems is producing a result that the electronic warfare officer finds worth noting. The telemetry is running a different encryption scheme than the March collection, he says. The signal architecture changed. He marks the difference. The signal architecture change suggests a modification to the telemetry system, possibly an attempt to make the telemetry harder to exploit by the intelligence assets that the launch facility's operators are presumably aware are parked in the Japan Sea, watching every test. The modification is noted. The modification itself tells analysts something about the North Korean program's awareness of collection activities and the countermeasures they are willing to invest in. The electronic warfare officer's note becomes a paragraph in the collection report. The paragraph will be read. They changed the transmission interval too, the electronic warfare officer adds, at 2:58. Burst format at 8-second intervals in March. Now continuous low power. Somebody made a specific choice. The continuous low power approach reduces detectability but reduces data rate. The choice changed between March and tonight, which implies someone assessed that the burst format signal was being collected against. They were right. The note goes into the collection record. Everything is connected. The stories accumulate. The terminal phase begins at 3:22 when the re-entry vehicle enters the upper atmosphere, approximately 80 miles from the projected impact point. The plasma sheath generates a characteristic radar signature. The SPY-1D's terminal tracking builds the final package: re-entry angle, deceleration profile, structural behavior through peak heating. All of it going into the record that the Missile Defense Agency has been waiting for from this specific variant. At 3 hours 28 minutes and 41 seconds, the track ends. The Aegis BMD processor flags the contact as impact with surface. The impact point is 382 nautical miles northeast of Musudan-ri, in open water in the Japan Sea. The watch team logs the impact time and the coordinates. The SPY-1D returns to its standard BMD search mode, watching the sky above the Korean peninsula with the same patient attention it has maintained since USS Curtis Wilbur arrived in the Japan Sea. The commanding officer looks at the impact coordinates. He looks at the collection summary that the tactical action officer is already compiling on his console. He looks at the time. It is 3:28. He has been in the CIC for 37 minutes. He will be here for another 3 hours until the watch changes at 4 o'clock. He considers the coffee situation. The coffee made at midnight is now 2 hours further into its journey toward irrelevance. He decides to order fresh coffee. This is, under the circumstances, an entirely reasonable decision. The watch team has done its job. The collection is complete. The 4.2% Burnout velocity variance is already in the theater commander's inbox. The telemetry architecture change is in the electronic warfare officer's draft report. Fresh coffee is the appropriate response to a productive morning. The full collection report runs to 36 pages, which is, by the standards of what a single ship can produce from a single ballistic missile observation event, an excellent return on the operational investment of positioning a BMD destroyer in the Japan Sea during an elevated alert window. The report covers the boost phase measurements, the burnout velocity variance, and its range implications, the apogee correlation data, the re-entry vehicle signature, and the telemetry system architectural change. The report is formatted and transmitted at 4:31, by which time the midwatch has turned over, and the morning watch team is settling into their consoles with fresh coffee and the quiet satisfaction of having inherited a productive intelligence record from the people they just relieved. The report goes to Pacific Command, to the Missile Defense Agency, to the Defense Intelligence Agency's Ballistic Missile Assessment Program, to the intelligence services of Japan and the Republic of Korea via established liaison channels, and to a distribution list whose breadth reflects the number of organizations that have a direct operational interest in knowing that the missile they have been assessing has a 4.2% higher burnout velocity than their existing models indicated. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force's Missile Defense Program receives it. The Republic of Korea Air Force's Ballistic Missile Defense Coordination Center receives it. The Missile Defense Agency's Interceptor Design Group receives it because the 4.2% variance affects the engagement envelope calculations for the SM-3 Block 2A in ways that need to be assessed. The $37.5 million per missile is still the price. The assessment of when and how to use those missiles just got more precise. Now let us address what Pyongyang said happened. Because North Korean state media's approach to ballistic missile test reporting is a specific and interesting genre that operates by rules quite different from any other state's information operations. The Korean Central News Agency released a statement at 9 a.m. local time, approximately 6 hours after the impact. The statement announced that the Korean People's Army Strategic Force had successfully conducted a routine exercise, demonstrating the combat readiness of its strategic missile forces. The statement described the launch as a measured response to the hostile military exercises being conducted by the United States and its allies in the region, and noted that the exercise demonstrated the readiness of the missile forces to respond to any provocation at any time. The language was confident and precise in the specific way that KCNA statements about missile launches are always confident and precise, which is to say very. No specific missile type was mentioned. No specific trajectory parameters were described. The impact point was not mentioned. The statement was accompanied by photographs released through official media channels showing the launch, dramatic and well-composed images of the missile climbing against a dark sky, clearly taken from a ground observation position at Musudan-ri, with the appropriate senior personnel observing in the foreground. The photographs are real. The launch happened. The statement's description of the launch as a demonstration of combat readiness is, in its own terms, accurate. It was a demonstration. The missile flew. It impacted in the sea as planned. The statement does not mention USS Curtis Wilbur. The statement does not mention the SPY-1D. The statement does not mention the 4.2% burnout velocity variance or the telemetry architecture change or the 36-page collection report that was in 17 inboxes before the KCNA statement was drafted. The statement describes a demonstration. The collection report describes an observation. Both are accurate descriptions of what happened on the same morning in the Japan Sea. One of them changed something about missile defense planning in the Pacific. It was not the statement. The second account, from the party newspaper, Rodong Sinmun, described the exercise as having achieved all planned technical objectives and as having demonstrated that the missile forces are capable of striking targets at the planned range under the current conditions. This is accurate in the sense that the missile flew the planned trajectory and impacted near the planned impact point. The Rodong Sinmun account does not comment on the burnout velocity measurement that USS Curtis Wilbur collected because the Rodong Sinmun does not know about the burnout velocity measurement. The launch facility at Musudan-ri collected its own performance data from its own telemetry system. The new telemetry architecture, which they modified specifically because they assessed the old one was being collected against, may or may not have protected the content of that data from exploitation. The SLQ-32 collection record says the signal was received at the new architecture's frequency and power level throughout the flight. The content remains encrypted. The architecture change itself, as the electronic warfare officer noted, told its own story about what they know about what the collection assets know. The SM-3 Block 2. missiles are in their cells, not expended, not needed, doing exactly what $37.5 million missiles do when the trajectory went into open water. Wait. The Japan Sea at 4:30 is cold and quiet, -1 ballistic missile test and plus 36 pages of collected data. The net result is favorable. The petty officer who brewed the fresh coffee at 3:30 is now off watch and eating breakfast. He made excellent coffee. It was the right decision at the right time. This does not appear in the official record, but it was noted by the people who drank it. Bye for now.